We are about to go on the Today Show, so I need to do my hair and makeup.
So we're doing a live shot with the Today Show, and we'll be on very shortly. I think we got about 2.5 minutes till we're actually going to be out for a little.
Okay, guys, everybody in, coats off, hair fixed. Let's go. We got get ready to do the live shot right now. Let's go. Yeah, we did about 27 interviews last week. Actually, it's 28. 28.
Hey everyone, it's Katie from Without a Crystal Ball. Welcome back to my channel. It's Friday, June 3rd. It's June 3rd. It's the day that Lorelai and Luke were supposed to get married. June 3rd. She had the perfect dress, the perfect cake, the perfect invitations, the perfect venue, and they never got married on that day. But it will forever be Lorelai and Luke's wedding day, even if they didn't get married on June 3rd. So happy June 3rd. Now on to something I got yesterday. So the transcripts from Josh Duggar's sentencing the sentencing hearing, they actually were filed on Monday, and I was able to get a copy of them from the court reporter, and they had some details in there that I didn't notice had even been reported, and I was like, this is interesting. It gave me a lot better understanding of why the judge came to the decision that he made and where Josh might be going and all of the factors around Anna and those letters that they wrote. During the sentencing hearing, from what I could ascertain from the transcripts, the judge was really impressed with the letters by the family because essentially a lot of people that end up in his court don't have any sort of family support. And so because Josh has family support, that apparently is like very different. But I also noticed that there was a lot in this case, in this one-day hearing, where they were actually talking about how unique Josh's case was to all other cases and that they had ever dealt with. One thing specifically was around covenant eyes. So one of the things that the prosecutors kept bringing up during this hearing was that Josh had taken extreme steps to like mask what he was doing and what he was involved with during what he was involved with. And the judge said that he had never had a single person go to such lengths as Josh did to mask what they were doing online. And I was thinking, wow, I didn't even think what Josh was really doing was that technological. I would have thought that anyone that was involved in this kind of behavior would have been super careful, but apparently him, with covenant eyes, the partition, and all these other things like deleting evidence, they said made it a unique situation. And because of him deleting things, harder to detect. And because of that, no way for them to know if things happened beyond the 3 days that they were able to determine from the forensics in his computer. They admitted in court that they didn't get all of his devices, and some of them could have been very well wiped clean and they never would have known. Isn't that wild? There was a part, though, when they got down to the family components, and it's really interesting because, in a lot of those letters, they were all talking about what a good family man he was and how great of a person he was. And how I kept thinking, like, yeah, you should have thought about that on the day that you did that. That's exactly what the prosecutor said. So this is what they said. Mr. Duggar knew more than anyone what a scandal would do to his family. He had been through it. He didn't look at the sea of like, I have covenant eyes up here. I owe my family a responsibility not to do this. No, he just installed his Linux partition and thought he could hide it and keep doing what he wanted to do. Also added to this is Duggar, he comes from a privileged, wealthy family. That's hardly the basis to find someone who is deserving of a downward variance simply because they have a large number of children. Wait for it. He does have a wife, and as far as I know, nothing in the PSR shows that his wife does not have the ability to work. His large family definitely is known within Northwest Arkansas. Did the feds literally just say, did Dustin Roberts literally just say, as far as I know, Anna Duggar can work, and there's nothing in that report that says she can't work? And why weren't you thinking about your family on the day that you did this? It's like Dustin Roberts is reading my mind, or that I'm reading his mind, because honestly, when I saw those letters, that's exactly how I felt. Exactly. Now I'm going to say this. Judge Brooks was way more sympathetic to Josh, I think, than the U.S. attorneys were in this case. He was more willing to give and cut a little bit of slack to Josh, simply like regarding like how long it had been since the things that had happened to what he did to his sisters, or the fact that there had been no other reported incidences since then, or the fact that he said that, you know, Josh being unfaithful to Anna was irrelevant to the situation, even though that infidelity included what Danica Dillon said. So is it really irrelevant? Is it not? I don't know. Like, I understand they say it's irrelevant, but the way that the judge sort of ruled on things, I was like a little bit shocked. And then it really did make me realize and wake up to the fact that they just don't take this situation as serious as if a child was actually being like hands-on with him. And that makes me so frustrated. Like, he says, like, the hands-on people are the ones that are the worst, and they are treated the most, like, they get the most significant time. And then the ones that don't have hands-on, like Josh in this case, it's still serious, but not as serious. And I thought, is it really? Like, they're both doing the same thing. And the guys that are doing the hands-on stuff are doing it because there's people like Josh that are willing to watch it. So I feel like they are two people that are like, they rely on each other. Like, those guys making that stuff wouldn't be making it unless there was people that wanted to watch it, like Josh. It's like they have a symbiotic relationship. I hate that it's classified this way in the court system, and I hate that this is like where we've come to. And I wish there was tougher sentences for this. And even though everything pointed to him getting 240 months, unfortunately, that's not how they sentence in these cases, and it's really, really disconcerting. Anyways, Anna can get a job, according to Dustin Roberts. Another thing that they talked about was, or the judge wanted to know about, was like, why wasn't there any more evidence beyond those 3 days? Like, he thought that was a little bit weird. And he basically said that there was just like this very small window of time where there was no one else at the car lot, where Josh would have been alone with that computer. Because he said that like Matthew Waller's last day was in like the end of April, and then he and Josh go out of town to a thing for the Institute in Basic Life Principles, like their family conference. And so then when he gets back, Randall Berry starts on May 26th. So Josh didn't have a lot of time between when he got back from the conference to when Randall Berry was hired. And we don't know like those days from, you know, May 16th to May 26th, what was happening, if he had other people at the lot, if he was like tied up with something else. But there was only 20 days of time where he was actually alone. Only 20 days of time that he was actually alone at the car lot. So that's kind of what they said there. But they couldn't prove that they're like, because they don't have remnants on other things, they don't know. So that's why the 3 days happens, right? And then the next thing I wanted to just bring up, and this is sort of going back to what Dustin Roberts was talking about with Anna get a job. So while like the judge was figuring out what, you know, how he was going to weigh things with the sentence. So he went through all the different factors, like the different enhancements. He talked about like whether he gave a lot of precedence to this enhancement, whether he considered this, and he would say, okay, this is mitigating, this is aggravating, this is mitigating, this is aggravating. And he gave the fact that he had, you know, good support by his family as sort of a mitigating factor in his sentence. The fact that he, you know, behaved really well while he was out on bond as a mitigating factor. But he talked about, like, you know, the letters, like, so many people depend on me. This is what he said. You're 34 years old, you're young, no matter what sentence the court imposes, you'll be, by my standards, still be a relatively young man when you get out. That bodes well for you. You have a large family in many respects. Your immediate family, you have a wife and 7 children who are dependent upon you financially. And I suppose you can look at that from many different angles, but the reality is that sending you to prison for any especially long period of time will be more harming to you and to others that depend on you that aren't in that circumstance. And he said, and I don't think that I put a lot of weight on that. But I think it's a relevant mitigating circumstance here. So even though Josh has people that are dependent on him, he says it's not super relevant, but he did consider it as a mitigating factor because other people were being affected by his choices. And I just thought, like, in any other situation, would a judge be this lenient and say, well, your wife, you've got a kid and wife, and they are dependent on you? Like, I wish that the Dustin Roberts would have been the judge, because I feel like if Dustin Roberts would have been the judge, it would have been like throwing the book at him. But that's not what happened. He thinks that the letters show that Josh is going to basically behave on when he gets out, maybe. Okay, and so he's got all these people that are dependent on him. And he also referenced the letter by Denise, which said, I think almost every letter writer told me about the widow that you've been silently not publicizing, paying a couple $1,000s a month to help her get her by. And I thought the letters that your mother and your wife in particular wrote were very articulate. And certainly they describe someone that we really can't recognize from the Josh Duggar that we see and read about in this report. And I must acknowledge that you have done some bad things, very bad things, but your life as a whole, the court must look at as well. And in your life as a whole, you have done a lot of good things. You do have a lot of good attributes, and it is only fair that the court recognize the good things that Josh Duggar has done. But I'm reminded of a quote that's attributed to John Wooden, and it's a basketball coach, and he said, the true test of a man's character is what he does when no one's watching. And you knew Covenant Eyes was watching, and you went around Covenant Eyes. So ultimately, he weighed all the factors and decided on 151 months. He even said that there was a period during that where he said it could be up to 195 months based on if he went on the average. He went below what other people around him were being sentenced at. And he said that the fact that Josh didn't even admit he was guilty or didn't accept responsibility even after the guilty verdict, truly he thought was unusual. He said that there's so much evidence that proves that it was Josh, and the fact that he takes no responsibility for it was an aggravating factor, and a big one when he considered the sentence for Josh. So it wasn't so much that he did stuff to his sisters. It was like the fact that Josh took no responsibility for what he did kind of bit him in the butt. I don't know, man. I feel like we need to, I don't know what to say. I read through it, and I was trying to wrap my head around where the judge was coming from, and I was trying to wrap my head around about what was, the thought process and trying to be fair. And I feel like a part of it was that he wanted to send a message, but he knew that if he did, I feel like in a way he might have felt like if he did too much time, everyone would say that he was only doing that because of Josh. And I feel like that played a huge role in it, because he didn't want to exaggerate the sentence because it was Josh and it wasn't someone else. So, he brought up the fact that the case was a huge story publicly because of who he was, but they can't ignore the precedents in the courts for sentencing just because it's Josh. It's frustrating. And Josh is a deleter who lies and is able to get around things and very skilled, which the judge, I think, wants to give him a benefit of a doubt and see that, your family says you're a good person. Everyone says you're a good person. And I think the judge is trying to be fair so that there's not anything overturned on appeal. And I also think those letters worked in a way, and it's really sad, because I think those letters were misguided. And I think a lot of those people said those things being manipulated by Anna or Jim Bob. And that's unfortunate. But I did appreciate the fact that Anna's reliance on him wasn't a huge factor, because he had a responsibility to Anna to think about that on those days, and instead he tried to get around that, and he still did it. And in terms of whether or not they think that he had been doing this for a very long time, they couldn't say, and he said they probably will never know, because he's so good at hiding things, and he might even get better at hiding things if he's released. The fact that when he added a stipulation about Josh not being able to view any adult content, Josh's attorneys argued against it. And the judge and the prosecutors were basically saying that this is a man that has an addiction. And if you give him just an inch of that addiction, it can take him into some really dark places. And that there was evidence on his phone that he had found ways to bypass covenant eyes so that on his phone he could still look at that content. And so the judge didn't feel comfortable allowing Josh even the remote chance that watching of that content would stimulate him to want to go down that path where he's looking at stuff that's even worse and involves children. They couldn't say if it was just he wanted to look at kids, or it was an addiction that made him cross a legal line. And the judge literally said that, like, maybe in the throes of an addiction to this content, you cross a legal line where you're like, I'm going to go watch something that I've never seen before. And I don't know, like, sure, maybe, but how do you ignore what he did to his sisters? How do you ignore the stuff that he looked at? I don't think it's as simple as being an addiction. Do you? I mean, I feel like there has to be some sort of attraction. I don't think that even the most addicted person could seek that out unless there was an interest in seeing it. Does that make sense? I'm not addicted to it, so I don't know. What are your thoughts? Tell me in the comments below. Bye, guys.